I was standing by my front door with a packed suitcase at my feet, completely ready to leave on a trip with my daughter, when everything I thought I knew about that vacation collapsed in a single message. I had been preparing to fly overseas with her, imagining weeks of walking, food, and laughter, when my phone lit up with words that stopped me cold. The message said, "You are not coming to Europe with us. My husband wants this trip to be just for family." They decided to take only his parents and leave me behind. That message arrived after I had already paid for their new house, a fact that would matter much more later than they realized. A few minutes earlier, I had been calmly folding my favorite travel shirt, the soft blue fabric slipping easily through my hands as I smoothed it flat. I had planned to wear it to dinner at a cozy restaurant my daughter, Emily, had found near a canal in Amsterdam. My suitcase sat open on the bed like an invitation, half packed with clothes I had chosen carefully for what I believed would be a once-in-a-lifetime trip together. On my phone, the weather forecast showed clear skies and mild temperatures, perfect for the walking routes I had printed and neatly tucked into my carry-on bag. I had been quietly humming an old jazz song while debating whether to pack my brown dress shoes or the broken-in sneakers I knew would save my feet after long days of sightseeing. My passport and airline tickets to Schiphol Airport rested neatly on the nightstand, untouched and ready. According to the clock, we were less than 7 hours from departure. I felt that familiar mix of excitement and nerves that always came before travel, the kind that makes it hard to sit still. Then my phone vibrated again. Emily's name flashed across the screen. I smiled at first, assuming she was sending a reminder about when to meet at the airport or asking if I had remembered my charger. I picked up the phone without hesitation. What I read instead made my stomach drop. "You are not coming with us. Mark thinks it is better if this vacation stays family only." I stared at the screen, reading the message again and again, as if repetition might somehow change the words. My thumb hovered uselessly above the glass. The sweater I had been folding hung awkwardly from my hands, while my mind struggled to make sense of what I had just read. Family only. The phrase echoed in my head over and over. I was her father. I was the one who had suggested the trip in the first place. I had paid for the flights, researched museums, bookmarked cafes, and spent countless late nights mapping out every detail. I had built this trip from the ground up. Since when did family exclude me? I sat down hard on the edge of the bed, the open suitcase still beside me like it was waiting for instructions that would never come. My hands shook as I typed the only response I could manage in that moment. "Okay." The disappointment settled deep in my chest, heavy and unmoving. I looked around my bedroom and saw evidence of a future that had just been erased. Travel-sized toiletries were lined up neatly on the dresser. Guidebooks sat stacked with colorful sticky notes, marking places Emily and I had talked about visiting together. A brand new camera, still sealed in its box, waited patiently for memories that would never be captured. I closed the suitcase slowly, snapping each latch with deliberate care. The sound of metal clicking shut felt final, almost ceremonial. After that, I called the airline and waited on hold, listening to bland music that did nothing to steady my thoughts. When a representative finally answered, she was polite and efficient. "I am sorry to hear about the change in your plans, Mr. Harris," she said. I thanked her, unsure whether my voice betrayed how hollow I felt. When the call ended, I sat alone in my living room, staring at the glossy travel brochures spread across the coffee table. The house felt strangely empty, quieter than usual. as if the walls themselves had noticed I was no longer going anywhere. Outside, a neighbor's dog barked sharply, the sound cutting through the stillness of the street. I picked up a brochure about historic canals and old city squares, flipped it once, and set it aside on the end table. The action felt insignificant, but it was all I could do in that moment, when it finally sank in that I had been intentionally left behind. As evening settled in, the emptiness followed me from room to room. I drifted through the hours without purpose, leaving my dinner plate in the sink instead of washing it right away, something I almost never did. The packed suitcase remained by my bedroom door, a silent reminder of plans that no longer existed. The television played softly in the background, some nightly news program I did not absorb at all. I kept checking my phone without knowing why, scrolling aimlessly as restless energy made my fingers twitch. Eventually, I opened Facebook, hoping for a distraction. I passed photos of a neighbor's cat, shared recipes, and arguments I did not want to read. The familiar blue glow of the screen felt oddly comforting in the dim living room. Then I saw it. Mark's parents stood smiling in front of a famous European landmark, bundled in scarves, looking thrilled and proud. The caption read, "The start of the best family vacation ever." The post had been uploaded 2 hours earlier. That was the moment everything became painfully clear. My thumb stopped midair above the screen. For a brief, desperate moment, I tried to convince myself there was an innocent explanation. Maybe they had taken a separate trip before ours. Maybe this was an old picture someone had decided to repost. My heart began pounding harder as I tapped on the profile, hoping the next images would calm me instead of confirm my fears. They did not. The next photo loaded slowly, and when it did, my chest tightened. Same city, same day. This time, there were 4 people in the frame. Brian's parents, Brian himself, and my daughter, Claire. They stood shoulder to shoulder outside a small cafe with striped awnings, the kind you only see in tourist districts. Empty wine glasses sat on a table behind them, sunlight catching the rims. Claire's caption was short and cheerful, and it made my stomach sink the instant I read it. So thankful for family time in the eternal city. I counted the faces on the screen with fingers that had begun to shake. 1, 2, 3, 4. The word family seared itself into my thoughts, sharp and unmistakable. I lowered the phone onto the coffee table, leaving the screen lit, their smiling faces glowing in the dim room. I stood and walked toward the kitchen window, staring out at my neighbor's home, where warm yellow light spilled through the curtains. Somewhere inside, people were eating dinner together, laughing, sharing the simple comfort of being wanted. The sense of betrayal came in waves, each one heavier than the last. I picked up the phone again, still clinging to the hope that I had misunderstood something, that the images would somehow rearrange themselves into a different story. They did not. The timestamps were current. The smiles were carefree. They were together in the city I had dreamed of visiting, following an itinerary I had built piece by piece. I returned to the window and caught my reflection in the glass. I looked pale, almost transparent, like I barely belonged in my own house. Behind my reflection, the phone screen showed their group photo, their joy layered over my solitary outline. The contrast was brutal. It showed me exactly where I ranked in their version of family. I barely slept that night. I tossed from one side of the bed to the other, while images of their vacation replayed behind my closed eyes. When morning finally arrived, gray light leaked through the curtains, and I knew I could not let this go unanswered. I needed to hear it directly, no matter how much it hurt. My coffee cup trembled slightly in my hands, as I sat at the kitchen table, running through possible conversations in my head. The time difference worked in my favor. It would be afternoon for them overseas. I took a steadying breath and dialed Claire's number, listening to the polished international ringtone echo in my ear. 1 ring, 2, 3. "Hi, Dad," she answered brightly. I could hear city noise behind her voice, footsteps, traffic, Brian speaking to someone nearby. It sounded alive and busy in a way my house no longer did. "I need you to explain something to me," I said, skipping any pleasantries. "Explain what?" she asked, distracted, as if her attention was fixed on a shop window or a landmark just out of view. "I saw the photos online," I said. "Brian's parents are there with you." There was a pause. It stretched longer than it should have. When she spoke again, her tone had shifted, guarded and tight. "Dad, we can explain everything. You said this trip was for family only," I replied. "So what am I supposed to be?" Her voice cooled noticeably. "Brian thinks you can be a lot. He did not want his vacation ruined." The word ruined landed like a punch to my ribs. "Ruined?" I said quietly. "I planned this trip. I paid for the flights. Brian's parents paid their own way," she shot back. "They do not expect us to take care of them all the time." "All the time," I repeated, the phrase hanging between us like an accusation. "I supported you both when—" "That was your decision," she interrupted sharply. "We never asked you to hold it over our heads." In the background, I heard Brian laugh about something unrelated, his voice light and carefree. The sound made my jaw tighten until it hurt. "Honestly, Dad," Claire continued, her words growing colder with each sentence, "Brian was right. You are too needy." The phone felt suddenly heavy in my hand. "I understand," I said. "Good," she replied. "We will talk when we get back." "Understood," I answered. I ended the call without saying goodbye. I placed the phone on the table slowly, carefully, as if setting down something fragile. The word needy echoed in my mind, over and over, refusing to fade. Without really deciding to, I walked into my home office. The walls were covered in photographs I had never questioned before. There was one of me running beside Claire as she learned to ride a bike. Another showed her in a graduation cap, smiling proudly. A wedding photo captured the moment I walked her down the aisle, tears in my eyes because I believed I was giving her the world. My hands curled into fists as I stared at those images, realizing how differently I must have understood our relationship. In one picture, I held her as a baby, both of us smiling at the camera. The glass reflected my face now, older and harder, with something cold taking shape behind my eyes. I reached out and straightened the frame with slow, exact movements. It felt like more than fixing a crooked photo. It felt like resetting something inside myself. I stayed in that office for a long time, surrounded by proof of what I had believed was love, but was apparently just convenience. Every photograph told a story I was only now seeing clearly. The wedding picture reminded me that I had paid nearly $30,000 to make that day perfect for her. The college graduation photo brought back memories of covering her student loans when Brian could not find steady work after finishing school. The house-hunting pictures scattered across my desk reminded me that I had co-signed their mortgage when no bank would approve them on their own. Holiday photos showed expensive gifts under trees I had paid for. Birthday pictures showed my presents opened last, almost as an obligation. Sitting there, surrounded by all of it, I finally understood the pattern I had refused to see before. Each memory pressed down on my chest, adding weight until it felt difficult to draw a full breath. I opened the drawer of my desk and pulled out stacks of bank statements and receipts I had kept out of long-standing habit. There it was in black and white. The $80,000 down payment for their house. Money taken directly from my retirement savings, funds I had carefully set aside for my own later years. There were car payments I had assumed when Brian lost his first job. Credit card balances I had quietly paid off when they were drowning, and the travel account I had been building for years, the same money that had purchased their airline tickets overseas. And it was never only about money. I remembered the plans I had erased from my own life without hesitation. The fishing trip with old friends I canceled because Claire needed someone to watch her child for the weekend. The dinner invitation from a woman in my book club that I turned down because Claire needed help moving boxes into a new apartment. I remembered postponing my own travel dreams again and again while making sure theirs stayed on track. I thought about Sunday dinners where Brian barely acknowledged I was in the room, holiday gatherings where conversations flowed around me as if I were furniture. I remembered the subtle ways he had made me feel like an inconvenience, while never hesitating to accept my financial support. Now that I was willing to see it, the pattern was unmistakable. I could not believe how long it had taken me to recognize it. My hands trembled as I turned the photo frames face down, unable to look at them anymore. The word needy looped endlessly in my head, sharp and relentless. And then, with sudden clarity, the truth settled in. There was a difference between being loved and being useful. They had never truly invited me into their lives. They had invited my wallet. I stood so abruptly that my chair rolled backward and struck the wall. In the mirror above my desk, I saw someone I barely recognized. A man who had been taken advantage of for years, someone who had mistaken generosity for love and been repaid with manipulation and disregard. The reflection showed patience, trust, and loyalty, all returned with dismissal and quiet betrayal. I opened my laptop and stared at my bank dashboard, my eyes locking onto the section labeled Authorized Users. Claire and Brian both had access. My finger hovered above the trackpad, one click away from changing everything. Then I closed the laptop without touching it. Some decisions could not be made on impulse. Some required intention and timing. I sat in the thick silence of my office, the closed laptop resting in front of me like a door I was not ready to open yet. The weight of years of being used pressed down on my shoulders. My gaze drifted back to the family photos I had turned face down. The house felt unnaturally still, as if it were holding its breath. Then my phone broke the silence with the familiar alert sound from my banking app. I almost ignored it, assuming it was another routine notification about account activity or credit monitoring. But something compelled me to pick it up. Maybe I just needed anything to interrupt the spiral of thoughts forming in my mind. The screen read, Account alert, transaction processed. I unlocked the app with my fingerprint, expecting to see a utility bill or a grocery charge. Instead, the transaction details appeared and hit me like a blow. 12:45 p.m. Trattoria dell'Orso, Rome, Italy. The timestamp showed it had occurred a little over 2 hours earlier, right in the middle of their afternoon overseas. The realization settled instantly and painfully. Claire had used my card. I had given her authorized access years ago when she was struggling to build credit, back when I believed I was helping her stand on her own. The irony burned deep in my chest. They had shut me out of their family vacation while using my money to pay for luxury meals abroad. I scrolled through the recent transactions, disbelief growing with each entry. Hotel charges, boutique purchases, tourist attractions, every one of them charged to my account. All of it happening while Brian's parents supposedly paid their own way and did not expect to be taken care of. I stood and began pacing the office, the phone clenched tightly in my hand. Every photo on the wall looked different now, less like memories and more like evidence. And then the thought arrived, calm and unmistakable. This is my moment. I opened the card management section of the app and navigated to authorized users. Claire's name appeared on the screen, plain and digital, representing years of access I had given freely out of love and trust. Another alert flashed across the display. $85. Bonavisor, Boutique Chic, Rome. She was shopping while I sat alone in my house, absorbing the reality of what they had done. That settled it. My finger hovered over the Remove User option for a brief moment as the instincts of a supportive father clashed with the certainty that support and exploitation were not the same thing. Then the confirmation screen appeared. Are you sure? This action cannot be undone. I selected, yes, remove immediately. The screen updated instantly. Authorized user access revoked. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of control return to me. It was unfamiliar, steady, and deeply satisfying. I placed the phone on my desk with careful intention and looked at my reflection in the darkened computer screen. For the first time in days, a small, genuine smile appeared on my face. I walked into the kitchen to make coffee, and for the first time since that original crushing message arrived, my movements felt deliberate and focused. The coffee maker sputtered and hummed as it came to life. Through the open window, I heard my neighbor's lawnmower roar to a start. The sound of an ordinary morning unfolding while something much quieter and more personal was shifting inside my house. The next morning I found myself sitting at the kitchen table actually savoring my coffee, something I had not done in days. The local newspaper was spread out in front of me, and I was halfway through an article about nearby high school graduations when my phone began ringing with sharp insistence. The number flashing on the screen was international, one I recognized immediately. I checked the clock. It was 9 o'clock in the morning for me, which meant it was 4 in the afternoon for them in Rome. I let it ring twice before answering. I was no longer rushing to respond or worried about keeping anyone happy. "Good morning to you too, Claire," I said calmly. I heard her inhale sharply on the other end of the line. "Dad, what did you do to the card?" Her tone was demanding right away. No greeting, no concern, just accusation. "I removed your access to my account," I replied evenly. "Do not play games with me," she snapped. "I tried to pay for lunch and it was declined, right in front of Brian's parents." Her voice had climbed to a shrill edge. "The waiter had to come back 3 times. 3 times. It was humiliating." "That sounds uncomfortable," I said, taking another slow sip of coffee. "Uncomfortable?" she shot back. "It was mortifying. You cannot do that. I need that card." "For what?" I asked. "I thought you did not need me taking care of you constantly." "That is completely different," she said, her voice rising with every word. "Is it?" I asked. There was a brief pause, and I could hear muffled voices behind her. Then she returned with something sharp and venomous in her tone. "You fix this right now, or there will be consequences." "What kind of consequences?" I asked. "Brian and I have been talking. When we get back, we are looking into care facilities." My coffee cup stopped halfway to my mouth. "Care facilities?" I repeated. "You are getting older," she said coldly. "You clearly cannot manage your finances responsibly anymore." The cruelty in her voice was stunning. "We will sell your house to pay for it. You do not need all that space." I heard Brian's voice in the background, casual and confident. "Tell him it is for his own good." She repeated it without hesitation. "Brian says it is for your own good." I sat there in silence, absorbing what she was threatening. They wanted to institutionalize me and sell my home, because I stopped paying for their vacation expenses. The audacity of it left me almost impressed. "Dad, are you listening?" she demanded. "Restore my card access." "I heard everything you said," I replied. "Good. So you will fix it?" "No." There was a sharp pause. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean no," I said calmly. "Enjoy the rest of your family vacation." "Dad, do not you dare." I ended the call and placed the phone face down on the table. My hands were steady as I took another long sip of coffee and looked out the kitchen window at my neatly kept yard. I had lived in this house for 30 years. It was fully paid off, my name alone on the deed. This was the house they casually planned to sell while locking me away somewhere convenient. I stood up with a renewed sense of purpose, leaving my coffee unfinished, and walked toward my home office. There was work to be done. I opened the filing cabinet and pulled out property documents, spreading them across my desk like a tactical map. I glanced briefly at my own deed, then focused on the second set of papers, the house on Maple Street, Claire and Brian's house. My name was the only one on the title, exactly as it had been since the day I purchased it for them. I remembered the conversation clearly from 2 years earlier. "Just for the mortgage approval, Dad," Claire had said. "We will transfer it later, once everything settles." Later never came. They were always too busy, always promising to handle it next month, next season, next year. I opened my desk drawer and found the business card I was looking for. Marcus Chen. He had handled the purchase of both properties. He was competent, discreet, and experienced. I grabbed my keys and headed out the door. The drive to his office took me through the familiar streets of Davenport. As I backed out of my driveway, Mrs. Patterson waved from her garden, her friendly smile a reminder of how ordinary this morning must have looked from the outside. 20 minutes later, I pulled into the parking lot of Chen Real Estate, housed in a carefully restored Victorian building. Marcus looked up from his computer when I walked in, surprise and warmth crossing his face. "Gary, it is good to see you," he said. "How is retirement treating you?" "I need to sell the Maple Street property," I said without hesitation, "and I need it done quickly." He paused, his practiced eyes studying my expression. "The house you bought for Claire," he said carefully. "Is everything all right?" "Everything is fine," I replied. "I just want it sold. What is the market like?" Marcus turned to his screen and began pulling up data with smooth efficiency. "The market is strong," he said. "Homes in that neighborhood are moving fast. You could be looking at 180,000, possibly closer to 190. The number settled pleasantly in my mind. I had paid 130,000 2 years earlier. "How fast can we move?" I asked. "If you price it to sell," he replied. "We could have serious interest within days. That is exactly what I want." He pulled out the listing paperwork, outlining inspection schedules, photography, and staging with reassuring precision. "My team can be there tomorrow." "The house is currently occupied," I said. "Will Claire be coordinating showings?" he asked. "Claire is in Italy," I said. "I have the keys." He looked mildly surprised, but said nothing more. We finalized the listing price, discussed commission and timelines, and I signed the agreement with a firm, steady hand. "I will begin marketing immediately," Marcus said. "In this market, offers can come in very quickly." We shook hands. I appreciated his professionalism and the fact that he did not ask questions I did not feel like answering. As I walked back to my car, I realized I felt lighter than I had in days. Classical music played softly on the radio as I drove through downtown Davenport, seeing my hometown with a clarity I had not felt in years. While I waited at a red light downtown, A young family stepped into the crosswalk in front of my car. The father carried a toddler on his hip, and the mother pushed a stroller beside him. Watching them stirred a memory of when Claire was that small, before our relationship slowly shifted into something transactional, before everything revolved around money, support, and what I could provide instead of who I was. When I pulled into my driveway, I stayed in the car for a moment and looked at my mailbox. My last name was painted on the side in faded black letters. For the first time in a long while, that name felt solid again, like it belonged to me and not to a list of obligations. I climbed the front steps, my keys clinking in my hand, the sound carrying a quiet promise that more changes were already in motion. Inside the house, I opened my laptop and immediately saw a new email notification from the real estate listing service. The subject line read, "Property listed successfully." Seeing those words brought a surge of satisfaction I did not bother trying to suppress. Still, I was not finished. I opened a new browser tab and searched for moving services in Davenport, Iowa. The first results were large national companies with polished websites and generic slogans. I scrolled past them, looking for something smaller, something run by an actual person. That was when I found Dave's Honest Moving, a local company with strong reviews, family-owned for 15 years. The description said you spoke directly to the owner, not a call center. That was exactly what I wanted. I dialed the number. "Dave's Moving. This is Dave." A deep, no-nonsense voice answered. "I need help moving belongings tomorrow," I said. "It is a time-sensitive situation." "What kind of timeline?" he asked. "Tomorrow morning, if possible," I replied. "It is an entire house. Where are we moving from, and where is it going?" I gave him the Maple Street address and explained that everything would need to go into storage. "You already have a unit lined up?" he asked. I realized I did not. Before I could answer, Dave continued, "I work a lot with secure storage over on Brady Street. Want their number?" A few minutes later, I was on a three-way call with Janet from Secure Storage, going over details. "For a full house, you will want at least a 10 by 20 unit," Dave said confidently. "The first month is paid in advance," Janet added. "That will be $120. "I will take it," I said. "Can someone meet us there tomorrow?" Once I was back on the line with Dave, we finalized everything. "My truck and 2 guys," he said. "We can start at 8 o'clock sharp." I repeated the Maple Street address and added, "The residents are out of town. I would prefer everything completed before they return." "Understood," Dave said. "Family situation?" "Something like that," I answered. "I have seen plenty of those," he said gently. "We will be quick and respectful." After ending the calls and paying for the storage unit online, I realized I was hungry. I made myself dinner and ate with an appetite I had not felt in days. Later, I set my alarm for 6:30 in the morning, earlier than my usual retirement routine, and laid out clothes I had not worn in years. Old jeans, sturdy boots, and a work shirt from my contracting days, back before my life revolved around funding other people's plans. That evening, I sat in the living room and watched the news with a clarity I had been missing. The weather forecast called for clear skies, ideal conditions for moving. Everything was aligning with a precision that felt both intentional and unavoidable. Before going to bed, I checked that my phone was fully charged and placed it on the nightstand beside a glass of water. As I brushed my teeth, I studied my reflection in the bathroom mirror. The man staring back looked different, focused, ready, someone who had stopped waiting for permission to take control of his own life. The next morning, I arrived at the Maple Street house at 7:45, 15 minutes early, as had always been my habit. The place looked different now. It was no longer my daughter's home in my mind. It was simply a property that needed to be cleared. Dave's moving truck was already parked out front, its engine running, exhaust visible in the cool morning air. Dave climbed down from the cab as I pulled in. He was a solid man in his 50s, with the calm, practical presence of someone who had handled countless complicated family situations without judgment. His 2 crew members, younger men in matching shirts, were already unloading equipment with practiced efficiency. "Mr. Harris?" Dave asked, extending a roughened hand. "Ready to get started?" I unlocked the front door with my spare key. The house was quiet and empty, and the stillness felt appropriate. We walked through each room as Dave evaluated furniture and belongings with a professional eye. "This should take about 3 hours," he said, jotting notes on his clipboard. "Maybe 4 with the heavier pieces." I pointed out what belonged to Claire and Brian, which was everything. The sectional sofa I had bought them for Christmas, Brian's elaborate home office setup with monitors and gaming equipment, Claire's clothing, filling 2 walk-in closets from wall to wall. The crew began in the bedrooms, boxing items, wrapping furniture, and labeling everything with methodical care. I insisted on helping, despite Dave warning me about liability. "I am not that old," I told him. One of the younger movers grinned, and for the first time in a long while, I felt fully present in my own life again. Before long, I was carrying boxes marked Claire's books and Brian's sports gear, and I felt an unexpected sense of satisfaction watching their belongings disappear into cardboard, organized and labeled with clinical efficiency. In the master bedroom closet, I came across several wedding photo albums tucked away on a high shelf. I opened one out of instinct and flipped through the pages. The pattern was impossible to ignore. Brian's parents appeared in nearly every photograph, front and center, smiling proudly. I was barely there at all. I counted maybe 3 pictures with me in them, always cropped near the edge, like an afterthought. I closed the album quietly and handed it to one of Dave's crew without comment. Room by room, we continued clearing the house. Each space revealed expensive items I had almost forgotten buying for them over the years. Designer handbags, still in dust covers, high-end electronics, the leather dining set I had purchased for their first anniversary because they said they wanted something grown up. My lower back began to ache, but I ignored it. The discomfort felt insignificant compared to the clarity driving me forward. In what had been intended as a future nursery, I stopped for a moment. The room held a crib, a changing table, and boxes of unopened baby supplies they had once assembled with optimism, talking about grandchildren that never arrived. For the first time all morning, hesitation crept in. I wondered if I had gone too far. Then, inside a desk drawer, I found Brian's credit card statements, luxury purchases, expensive dinners, designer stores, all dated during periods when they had told me they were barely scraping by and needed my help. Any lingering doubt vanished instantly. "You all right, Mr. Harris?" Dave asked, noticing I had paused. "Just old memories," I said. "Let us keep moving." By 11:30 in the morning, we completed a final walkthrough of the now empty house. The rooms echoed differently, stripped of furniture and noise. Sunlight poured through bare windows, landing on clean, vacant floors. I locked the front door and slipped the keys into my pocket, then followed the moving truck to secure storage. I stood there and watched as their entire life was unloaded into Unit 47B. Boxes stacked neatly, furniture wrapped and shelved, everything reduced to inventory. I paid Dave in cash and added a generous tip. "I hope things work out for you," he said sincerely as he shook my hand. Driving home alone, my phone lit up with a Facebook notification. I pulled into my garage, the phone still vibrating in the cup holder, like a warning that the quiet part of my day was ending. Inside the house, I finally checked it. Claire had posted several angry updates. Some people have no respect for family privacy. Friends commented beneath it, asking what had happened. Claire replied just enough to paint herself as the wronged party, wounded and confused. I closed the app without responding. Instead, I called Marcus Chen. "Gary, I have great news," Marcus said immediately, his voice energized. "We have a serious buyer. Cash offer." "Already?" I asked. "Couple in their early 30s, he said. "Just relocated for work. They love the neighborhood." He paused deliberately. "They are offering $185,000, higher than projected." The number settled pleasantly in my chest. "When do they want to close?" I asked. "That is the impressive part," Marcus replied. "They want to close immediately. They could move in this weekend." I glanced at the calendar. It was Thursday. "This weekend?" I repeated. "They are living in a corporate apartment on a month-to-month lease," he explained. "Very motivated. I can expedite everything if you are ready." "Do it," I said. Friday morning found me seated in the title company office, signing documents with steady, deliberate strokes. I met the buyers during the process. Michael and Sarah Thompson, early 30s, polite, hopeful, and full of plans. They reminded me painfully of who Claire and Brian used to be, before entitlement hardened into expectation. "We love the landscaping," Sarah said during the final walkthrough of the empty house. I did not mention that I had paid for it. "It is perfect," Michael said as I handed him the keys. "We can move in tomorrow morning?" Later that day, a bank transfer confirmation appeared on my phone. $185,000, minus fees, left me with $172,500 deposited into my account. What had started as an act of paternal love ended as a clean, decisive business transaction. Saturday morning, I drove past the Maple Street house one last time. A U-Haul truck sat in the driveway. Michael and Sarah were outside directing movers with contagious enthusiasm. I saw a baby crib being carried through the front door. A new family, a fresh start. I parked across the street and watched as Sarah planted flowers along the front garden, while Michael assembled a swing set in the backyard. My phone rang with an international number just as a taxi pulled up in front of the house. Perfect timing. Claire stepped out first, clearly exhausted from travel, but instantly alert as she took in the scene. Brian followed, paying the driver. His face shifted from confusion to alarm as he noticed the truck, the strangers, and the unfamiliar movement inside what he still thought of as his home. "Excuse me," Brian called out to Sarah, who looked up from the flower bed with open curiosity. "What are you doing in our house?" Michael stepped into the doorway holding a folder of documents. "Your house?" he said carefully. "I think there has been a mistake." I opened my car door and stepped out, walking calmly toward them. I pulled an envelope from my jacket pocket as I crossed the street. Claire spotted me. In the span of seconds, her expression shifted from confusion to realization to pure rage. "Dad, what is going on?" she demanded. "Why are strangers in our house?" Michael and Sarah exchanged uneasy glances, Sarah gripping her gardening trowel a little tighter. "I do not know who you are," Brian said sharply to Michael, "but you need to remove your things immediately." Michael raised the paperwork. "We have the deed," he said. "We closed yesterday." "That is impossible," Brian snapped. "This is our house." Sarah spoke softly but firmly. "Maybe we should call the police." I stepped forward, my voice steady and controlled, the tone I had learned over decades of managing construction crews and tense negotiations. "That will not be necessary." Claire turned on me instantly. "Dad, fix this. Right now." I did not answer her. Instead, I turned to Michael and Sarah first. "I am sorry for the confusion," I said calmly, turning first to the young couple. "Please go ahead and continue moving in." Then I faced Claire and Brian. "The house was sold because it was mine," I said evenly. Brian's face flushed deep red. "What do you mean it was yours?" "Look at the original deed," I replied. "It was never transferred into your names." Claire's voice shot up into that sharp, familiar pitch. "You cannot just sell our home." "I can sell my own property," I said without raising my voice, and that is exactly what I did. "This is theft," Brian shouted. "We will sue you." "With what funds?" I asked calmly. "Last I checked, your cards stopped working in Europe." Michael leaned towards Sarah and whispered something. She nodded and began walking back toward the front door, their front door now. "Please go inside," I told them. "This situation does not involve you." Claire's voice cracked, desperation seeping through the anger. "Where are we supposed to live? Where is everything we own?" I held out the envelope I had been carrying. Brian snatched it from my hand and ripped it open, scanning the contents before reading out loud. "Secure storage, Unit 47B, Brady Street." "Storage?" Claire whispered. "You put our entire life into storage?" "I made sure everything was packed carefully," I said. "The first month is already paid." Brian crushed the paper in his fist. "This is insane. You cannot do this to family." "Family does not leave a father out of a family vacation," I replied. "That has nothing to do with this," Claire snapped. "Does it not?" I asked. Brian stepped closer, trying to intimidate me by invading my space. "We will fight this. We will take you to court." "The sale is legal," I said steadily. "The property belonged to me." Claire's tone shifted, sliding into the manipulative cadence she had used since childhood whenever she wanted something. "How could you do this to your own daughter?" I looked at her for a long moment before answering. "How could you do what you did to your own father?" Sarah stepped back outside, concern evident in her face. "Is everything okay?" "Everything is fine," I said gently. "Enjoy your new home." Claire and Brian stood frozen on the sidewalk, their European suitcases still at their feet, looking like tourists who had wandered into the wrong life. I turned and walked back toward my car, my steps measured and solid against the pavement. "This is not over," Brian shouted after me. I slid into the driver's seat and started the engine. The classical music resumed exactly where it had stopped. "Yes," I said quietly, "it is." 3 months later, I was reading the morning paper when my doorbell rang. A process server handed me a packet of legal documents. Claire and Brian had filed a lawsuit. I signed for the papers without surprise. That same afternoon, I sat at my kitchen table reviewing the court's decision. Case dismissed. The property owner had exercised his legal right to sell his own asset. The judge was thorough and unsympathetic. Claire and Brian were responsible for their own legal fees. My attorney called within the hour. "Clean win," he said. "They have no grounds for appeal." A few days later, the local newspaper ran a small item, "Family property dispute resolved." I filed the paperwork in a new folder labeled Legal Victory and went on with my day. For months afterward, Davenport's informal gossip network stayed busy. At the coffee shop, I overheard quiet conversations. "I always thought that son-in-law seemed entitled," someone said. "Gary worked hard his whole life," another replied. "He deserved better." A few voices murmured, "Family should stick together." But I had learned to let opinions slide past me without sticking. When I ran into Marcus Chen at the hardware store, he asked, "How are you holding up?" "Better than I expected," I told him honestly. That afternoon, I stopped by a pet store I had noticed months earlier. A 3-year-old golden retriever named Max needed a new home because his family was relocating overseas. "He is great with people," the owner explained. "Loves car rides, used to being part of a family." I knelt down, and Max walked straight toward me, tail wagging like he had already decided. The connection was immediate. He seemed to recognize my loneliness, and I recognized his need for someone who would not leave. An hour later, Max was riding in the passenger seat of my car, head out the window, both of us headed toward something new. That night, he slept beside my bed, and for the first time in months, the house did not feel empty. With Max stretched at my feet, I started researching travel trailers. Articles about senior travel, freedom, and open roads filled my screen. At local dealerships, salespeople were eager to help. I test drove a 25-foot Airstream, the perfect size for one person and a dog who had already claimed the passenger seat. Using the trade-in value of my second car and my savings, I bought it outright. Max took to trailer life instantly. We mapped out a route together. National parks, quiet towns, places I had always wanted to see but kept postponing for family obligations. On the morning we left Davenport, my house was secured for an extended absence. Mail was held. Neighbors agreed to keep an eye on things. As I loaded the trailer, I packed camping gear, Max's supplies, and one photo album, pictures of Claire as a child, from before disappointment reshaped everything. Max sensed adventure, his excitement contagious as I checked the hitch and started the engine. We drove through Davenport one final time, familiar streets looking smaller now. Passing Maple Street, I saw Michael and Sarah's children playing in the yard. The house was finally filled with laughter, exactly as it should be. A highway sign ahead read, "Colorado, 500 miles. Max leaned into the wind, my hands steady on the wheel. That evening we stopped at a scenic overlook in the mountains. I set up a folding chair as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in deep oranges and purples I had never slowed down enough to notice. Max settled beside me, content and loyal, wanting nothing more than companionship. For the first time in years, I was exactly where I belonged.